Right, thank you very much, Hugh. Just very quickly, unfortunately, Crónán's not able to be with us today, and also Owen's not able to be with us today, but I think I'm speaking again a bit later on to the whole conference in terms of updating the strategy, and be talking a little bit about the Union Catalogue then, so there's that to look forward to. What I wanted to talk about briefly really is around our current thinking on where the Conul strategy may or could take us, and in some ways hopefully you'll see it may appear that Lorcan and I have written this collaboratively or in some kind of synchronicity anyway, but a lot of what Lorcan, particularly Lorcan, I think the last third or so of your talk in terms of the challenges you were raising for us are very much on the agenda for us with Conul, and a lot of it's implied quite carefully, I hope, in the strategy. So I think really for our session this morning, it's what does collaboration potentially mean for us as a country, and also us as a consortium, which are two different things we should remember in Conul at the moment. So that in terms of the overview, I just wanted to look at some of the history of what we mean by libraries and some of the key questions, I guess, for us at the moment. And rather modestly, I only assumed about 50 people would be at this session. I think there's slightly more than that. So for those of you who have a copy of the little questionnaire, please do fill it out instinctively, although you may want to wait until the end. So similarly to what Lorcan was saying earlier, what did we used to mean by big libraries, or indeed for those of us who went to what we fondly remember as library school, what were we taught or what were we expecting to be running sort of mid-career and so on? And I guess it's this kind of library in terms of the scale and what we meant by scale. We did used to mean millions of print monographs held by, and back in the day, held by a relatively few institutions. Tens of thousands of journal titles, again, almost in national sets, so there are frequently very strong holdings in particular subject areas or disciplines in specific libraries. For those of you, and I know you're out there, who have a passion for official publications, I know who the DCU people are, so you can keep your eyes to the floor. These incredibly important collections were generally held in a fairly focused manner in most European libraries at least. And of course that's been completely transformed by URL delivery of these sort of materials. And of course special collections by their very nature in a sense are unique, or as I prefer to say, nearly unique in most examples. But these regularly were running into the, or still remain running into the millions of individual items as well. The first time I wrote this slide, I actually had the word restrictive access policies, but I thought it was a little bit blunt, so I've changed it to prescriptive, which I think is a slightly closer way of thinking about how we in the past have thought about membership of our libraries and who has the right to look at our collections. Some of you who are on Twitter will have seen me react to Lorcan's comments about the collective ownership, which I thought was an extremely powerful way to end the talk. What do we mean now by big libraries? And I guess it's some of the same, but the web is definitely creating something of a level playing field. So all of these activities beyond the print collections and the idea of scale are changing and balancing and equalizing collections. I remember when I was working at the University of Nottingham, we presented the purchase of 18th century collections online, ECHO, as basically acquiring another floor of the main humanities library with a flick of a switch. In a sense, providing access to most of the collections in the 18th century from the University of Oxford in one go. And none of us were really prepared for this to be happening in our career, but these are the kind of step changes that are making or asking questions of what we mean by the big library now. Just to note, and I'll be using this slide again a bit later on in the day, the combined library holdings, if you like, to put it back into some of the more traditional language, but also the services for CONUL. When we produced the strategy, I asked all the CONUL libraries for statistics and developed some, I have to say, politically rounded up figures, I might admit to. But these are, generally speaking, the figures that represent the entirety of our 13, as they currently stand, libraries. So CONUL in itself is a very big library. And when Lorcan was asking at the end of his talk about what this might mean in terms of a national position or a national library service, these are the sort of figures that we're talking about at the moment. An awful lot already exists. We were just noting on the desk that actually all four of us are on the IRL steering group. I chair it at the moment, and IRL obviously is a critical, but I must say exclusive consortial licensing agreement between, as colleagues have explained, certain partners, not all of CONUL. But it's been a huge success where it's been employed. We do have a lot of activity where we're sharing other services around our collections. Not everyone is investing hundreds of thousands of euros in digitization and conservation services. Many of us are outsourcing that. We've always had interlibrary loan. It always seems really dull when you mention interlibrary loan these days, but you know, it was at the start really absolutely critical, and from a user's perspective, one of the core services that libraries provided. There's initiatives in other parts of the world. The UK Research Reserve, which deduplicated so many tens of thousands of print backruns, particularly of science journals, giving copies of Last Resort in one library plus the British Library. There's enormous shared storage projects on at the moment with Ivy League Plus. The Plus, I understand, is Stanford. And there's portal services that have been in play for some years. The Dart Europe portal, which I'm co-chair of, which currently has 700 university members across Europe. There's RIAN in the Irish Academy, which will also be part, I think, of a review around Ireland. There's obviously the important exchanges with staff and benchmarking exercises. But all of this still leaves some really big questions for us within our strategy. And I guess the biggest question is there at the top. Are we sharing enough, and what's the appetite to do more of this? How much of our really good work in collaboration still needs further change? Is our current collection management, and when I say that I also mean collection development, actually sustainable? When you look at the kind of graph that Rita brought out for us, even with just one format on e-journals. Are we planning for the hybrid future? Are we planning primarily for a digital future? Or are we, perhaps I would suggest, recognizing that it's more likely to be hybrid? Are our libraries, and principally for something like the CONUL strategy, properly aligned to the very large global challenges, the ones that are above library strategies, the change in our demographics of our populations, the shift in world influence and world power from west to east, the true global connectivity brought about particularly by mobile devices, it's probably worth mentioning, and of course environmental changes as well. How much would a global or even a national digitization or digital preservation policy actually cost in terms of power and outage and all the rest of it that it costs to run those kind of servers? I guess one of the questions that's always been important for me is, are we truly open? The current CONUL model is around serving our host organizations and clients with an agreed collaborative activity, and this has been a great strength for CONUL and many other consortia around the world. But I guess it's probably worth questioning, is this default position where we focus on our own institution first and a consortia second, is that actually too narrow? And I guess as librarians we would tend to say it probably is, but what do our institutions think? But for the library questions, what is the rate of duplication? What is the rate of sharing? And what are the risks around digital holdings? I guess Lorcan again was touching on some of this in terms of the future of our national print purchasing. And these are very significant questions for us as soon as you get above the level of an individual library and an individual institution. The money is basically coming from one or two different places, so that perhaps the libraries should be the first to ask these questions before they're asked of us. So my question really for this session is around how far should we go in terms of partnership, and just to get a sense of the room. It's really helpful to almost, if you like, take an executive moment and do a little survey of this group in terms of what may be suggested as the sort of three ways that libraries can operate. And I think all of us are probably operating in all three to a degree. But for the question for Conul is, do these definitions make sense? Do they resonate with yourselves coming from different libraries? We operate as independent libraries in terms of many functions, particularly HR at the moment, to a degree. We operate as a consortia where the conference is an example of that. IRL is an example of block negotiations. We share certain services, and to a degree with things like ALSID and Access, we monitor quite carefully access to our libraries physically and of course digitally. I suppose recognising some of the challenges that Lorcan set out in his keynote, there's this difference between consortia and networked libraries with interdependent collection management and collection development, genuinely open to all, with a shared strategy and vision, and perhaps to be reflective of certainly the position that the DCU president would take, which is around, it's great to be collaborative, but we are still very competitive, is that competition from the library's perspective might be seen to be international rather than local. And I think these are some of the questions that our strategy are moving us towards. So if we ask, if we agree that we should be doing something like a shared union catalogue for holdings in Irish libraries, does that mean that it's basically going to be a here's what you could have won to people who aren't members of our libraries? When we launched the strategy at the RIA in December, the publicity company that we were working with asked me a very pointed, and as it happened innocent but very perceptive question about, they were very excited about the idea of an Irish national catalogue. And the company said, does this mean that everyone will be able to see what's in all the libraries? And I said, yeah, absolutely, that's the purpose behind it. And his next question was, does that mean that everyone will be able to get access to what's in all our libraries? And we chose to answer it politically. But obviously these are the logical conclusions to some of the big areas of work that Conul are involved in at the moment. So your small survey there would be very helpful to us, particularly at board level, just to get a sense of where the community's feeling is on some of these questions, many of which I know have been asked and indeed answered before. But in the context of our new strategy, and perhaps in the context of running a very large conference such as this as well, these are obviously some key questions for us. I was really pleased that they found some echo in Lorcan's, particularly the last two questions on your sheet there about print scale and the idea of a network. Found some echo in Lorcan's keynote. So I'm happy to. Notice my green light is still on, which I didn't expect it to be. Does this mean I'm in Owen's time now? No? Okay. I'm happy to take some questions as part of the panel from there, but thank you very much indeed.
So with that in mind, thank you, Chris. If there are any questions to do very, very interesting presentations, now is the time. And I don't know if we have microphones. We do. We'll try and get down to you.